All right, so welcome to another deep dive with us, where we like to pick a particular set of materials and really pull out the gems and give you that concentrated version, so you can really quickly understand a whole field or a whole topic or something like that.
Yeah.
Today's a little different.
Yeah, it is.
We're going to be looking at a transcribed audio lesson that is actually for English language learners.
Yeah.
And it features a dialogue between a boyfriend and a girlfriend.
Exactly.
Now, our deep dive today is really to look at how we use language in relationships and how we communicate with each other on a very subtle level.
Yeah, and specifically in English. So, you know, this is, for learners of English, this is going to be really useful to go beyond the basic vocabulary. And really get into some of the deeper meanings and implications of what we're saying. When we use these really common phrases.
Yeah. One of the things that really struck me about this dialogue was how they were talking about love. And the lesson pointed out this crucial difference between saying to love someone and to be in love with someone.
Right.
Can you unpack that a little for us?
Yeah, so I think what's really interesting here is that in English, we make this clear distinction between different kinds of affection, right? You know, we can say that we love our family, we love our friends.
Right.
We can even love like things or activities.
Right.
I love a good cup of coffee.
Yeah.
It's very general.
No, I love my brother. Right.
Exactly.
But those two things are not the same.
Exactly. And so we use this verb to love very, very broadly to show strong positive feelings. But to be in love with is specifically reserved for a romantic partner.
Okay.
So your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife.
So it's romantic.
Exactly.
Oh.
It signals that there are very strong romantic feeling and that there's this unique connection you have with this one person.
Okay.
And it's interesting because, you know, I love you is a very strong statement. But when you say I'm in love with you, it's almost like a declaration.
Yeah, it's like next level.
Exactly. It's next level love.
Yeah.
And it really signals that this is somebody that you are romantically involved with.
Yeah.
And that you have very strong feelings for.
It's so interesting because I think a lot of languages don't have that distinction. They just have one word for love, and you have to kind of understand from the context.
Exactly.
Okay, well, this is fascinating. So they also use these really sweet terms called pet names.
Yes.
So what are pet names?
So pet names, basically, as the lesson clarifies, are affectionate nicknames that we use for romantic partners.
So not for our pets?
Not for our pets, no.
Okay.
Even though we might have pet names for them as well. But in this context, we're talking about romantic partners.
Right.
So in the dialogue, the examples we heard were honey and baby.
Right.
And those are very typical.
Pretty standard, yeah.
Yeah. But the lesson kind of gave us a spectrum of possibilities.
Yeah. What else is out there?
So we're talking about things like sweetheart, darling, sweetie, cutie, all those kind of classic terms of endearment.
Okay.
But what's interesting is that it also pointed out that some pet names can be cheesy.
Oh, absolutely.
Or a bit over the top.
Yeah, they gave some pretty funny examples.
Yeah, what were they?
Like snook, 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 or honey bunny, or sweetie pie.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, come on.
Those are definitely getting a little
much.
Yeah, a little much.
Yeah.
And what was a really good point that the lesson made was that a lot of couples also have their own unique pet names.
Yeah.
So maybe these are kind of inside jokes or things that have developed between them.
Right.
And those are not necessarily going to be understandable to people outside the relationship.
Right. Like a friend of mine, she calls her husband Captain. And I've never quite understood the origin of that one.
Right.
But it's totally their thing.
Yeah, and I think that's a really beautiful part of how language develops within relationships and how we have these kind of secret codes that we use to show affection to each other.
Now, one more thing about pet names that I thought was interesting was that they gave us a couple of examples from other cultures.
They did.
And I think that's fascinating because it shows how these terms of endearment don't always translate directly. You know, like they gave the example of gordo in Spanish, which literally means fat.
Which means fat.
But it's used affectionately, you know.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or in French, ma pute, which is my flea.
Right, which doesn't sound very romantic.
No, not at all.
In English.
No.
But, you know, it has that affectionate connotation.
Right. So it makes you wonder how many other languages have these kind of like seemingly strange terms of endearment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it shows that the feeling and the intention
yeah.
behind the word are often more important than the literal meaning.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit here.
Okay.
Because the dialogue actually started with the girlfriend asking, can we talk?
Right.
Now, that seems like such a simple question, but the lesson really dug into all the unspoken weight of that phrase.
It did. So what's really fascinating here is, can we talk?
Yeah.
Is a very simple question, grammatically, but it carries so much meaning.
Right.
It's almost always used to initiate a serious conversation.
Yeah.
Right? You're not going to say, can we talk?
Yeah, you wouldn't say that if you wanted to share like a funny meme that I saw online.
Exactly. So it often implies that there's something really important to discuss.
Okay.
Maybe something difficult. Right. Maybe some bad news.
So you're kind of bracing yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So if your partner says, can we talk?
Yeah. Right.
It's natural to feel a little apprehensive.
Yeah. It sets the tone. It does set the tone.
It's like that serious look.
Exactly, yeah.
Things are about to get real.
Things are about to get real.
Okay, so another phrase that they kind of dissected was, you know what I mean.
Right.
Now, this one seems pretty
self-explanatory.
Self-explanatory on the surface.
Right.
But there were some interesting nuances there.
Yeah. So basically, on a very basic level, you know what I mean, is a way of seeking confirmation, a shared understanding.
Right.
It's like saying, are we on the same page?
Right. Are we tracking?
Exactly. But what the lesson pointed out is that your tone of voice can totally change the function of that phrase.
Okay. So it can be a statement.
It can be a statement or it can be a question.
Or a question, just depending on how you say it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when it's a statement, it often has this falling intonation at the end.
And it kind of implies that the speaker believes that the listener already understands what they're saying.
Okay.
But when it's a question, it usually has a rising intonation at the end. And it's really directly asking the listener,
right?
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Okay.
And the examples in the lesson I thought were really good.
Yeah. What were some of those examples?
So one of the examples was, talking about a class and how boring it was.
Right.
And it said, you know what I mean?
Right, and that felt like a statement.
It felt like a statement, yeah, like they were just finishing a thought.
Yeah.
And then another example was about some friends.
Yeah.
And in that case, it really felt like a question.
He was like, are you with me on this?
Exactly. It was like, do you agree with me?
Right, okay.
So it just shows how even a very simple phrase can have these different meanings depending on the context.
Okay, let's move on because a little later in the dialogue, the girlfriend says, I want to know where this relationship is going.
Right.
Which, is...
big question.
It's kind of a huge question in a relationship.
Yeah, and the lesson, makes the point that this phrase really expresses this desire to understand the future of the relationship.
Yeah.
Right? Where is this going?
Yeah. Are we on the same path?
Exactly. Are we headed in the same direction?
Right.
Do we have the same goals?
Yeah.
And what I thought was interesting was that lesson also pointed out that you can use this construction.
Okay.
Where is this blank going? In so many other situations.
Oh, really? Like what?
Yeah, you could talk about your career.
Okay.
Where's my career going?
Where is this movie going?
You could be watching a film and say, where's this movie going?
Right.
You can be in a meeting at work and say, where's this meeting going?
Where's the project going?
Yeah,
That's a good point.
So it's a very versatile way of asking about the trajectory or the future of something.
No, there was this one phrase that was incomplete. Maybe it's just time we, and then ...
Yeah. That was a very tense moment.
Yeah. What's going on there?
So the lesson explains that this kind of incomplete phrase is really like a signal for a suggested course of action.
Okay.
So the speaker's hinting at something.
Right.
But they're not saying it directly.
Right.
And they're leaving the listener to kind of fill in the blank.
Right. And it creates this tension.
It does create this tension.
Right?
Because you're like, oh, what are they going to say?
Yeah, what's coming next?
Yeah.
And they gave us a few examples, right?
We did, yeah.
Like to finish that phrase.
Yeah, like maybe it's just time we break up.
Right.
Or maybe it's just time we have a baby.
Oh, wow.
Or, maybe it's just time we go home.
So it could be anything.
It could be anything.
Big or small.
Yeah. And so much depends on the context.
Right.
To understand what that missing piece is.
Right. So you really have to pay attention.
You do.
To all the clues. All right. Well, finally, they looked at this phrase. We've had our laughs. Which on the surface just seems like we had some good times.
Yeah, we've enjoyed ourselves.
We've had fun together.
Yeah.
But they went a little deeper.
They did. So we've had our laughs. Very simply means, we've shared some happy moments.
Right.
We've had fun together. But they gave us some alternative phrases, which I think are really valuable.
Like what?
So they said you could also say things like, we've had our ups and downs.
Right.
Or we've had our moments. And we've had our ups and downs really acknowledges that there have been good times and bad times.
Right. Challenges.
Yeah, exactly.
It hasn't all been rosy.
Right. And we've had our moments is a bit more general.
Okay.
It just means, we've had some memorable experiences.
Okay.
But it could be good or bad.
Okay.
And then a couple other phrases they gave us.
We've had our issues.
We've had our issues, which really focuses on the negative.
Right.
The problems.
The struggles.
Yeah, the challenge.
Okay.
And then we've had our special times.
Right, which is more positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just gives you a richer vocabulary to talk about the history of a relationship.
Right, not just that you have fun together.
Exactly.
So it's been really interesting looking at this dialogue.
It has.
Because, on the surface, it just seems like this kind of simple conversation between these two people. But we've really unpacked.
We've gone pretty deep.
A lot of really subtle nuances.
You have.
In the English language.
Yeah.
We talked about the difference between loving someone and being in love with them.
Right.
And all these different pet names. And what they can tell us about a relationship.
Yeah.
We talked about that kind of weightiness of, can we talk? And how, you know what I mean, can be both a statement and a question.
Yeah.
And then how we discuss the future of a relationship. And even those unfinished phrases like, maybe it's just time we.
Right.
Can really hint at some major changes.
Yeah.
And then finally, all these different ways that we talk about our past experiences together.
Right.
So really interesting stuff.
Yeah, and I think for our listener, especially if you're learning English, this is really valuable because it helps you to communicate more effectively.
Yeah.
And to understand what people are really saying.
Right. It's not just about the dictionary definition.
Exactly. It's about the implied meanings and the nuances.
Yeah.
The emotional weight.
Yeah. It's like the unspoken language within the spoken word.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of fascinated now thinking about all these different pet names that we talked about and what they reveal about intimacy and, cultural expression, not just in different languages, but even in different kinds of relationships. I mean, think about the different terms of endearment you use with your partner versus maybe your children.
Right, or your friends.
Your parents. I mean, it's fascinating.
It is. It's really interesting.
And it really makes you think about, these seemingly small words and how much affection and history they can carry.
Yeah.
So maybe take a moment and just think about that for yourself.
Yeah, think about the pet names that you use or that people in your life use. What do they really mean to you? What do they say about your relationships?
Well, on that note, this has been another fascinating deep dive.
It has.
I'm really glad we had this conversation.
Me too.
Until next time.
See you then.
Bye.